I'm here in my garage to tell you about a period in art history known as Mannerism. I figure there's at least 3 or 4 of you out there in the world who would be interested, so here goes, I'm going to tell you. But first, so you have something tangible in your head, let me just show you probably the most famous picture from this period ever. Probably one of the most famous paintings, period. So it was painted, can you see that? It was painted by an artist called Bronzino. This is a whole other issue in itself. Fantastic. So I wrote this a few years back, so I'm kind of just reading it. So I apologize if I'm just kind of reading it. So I'll try to make it. I'll try to make this interesting for you. It's a very, very fascinating subject, I think. So anyway. I've called this the fantastic world of Mannerist painting. So I'm just going to begin. Safe to say, outside specialized drawing rooms, most people have not heard the word Mannerism. Even some artists probably haven't heard of it or don't care, you know. A few that have likely put it on mind's back burner, just forgot about it. So why notice such an obscurity? Consider once in a while an old gem must be elevated from its dusty shelf, especially if appreciation has been to some extent obscured under Mona Lisa's diva butt. And we'll get to that. Unforgivingly, Mannerism happened to follow... Oh, we're getting to it right now. Mannerism happened to follow the High Renaissance, perhaps one of the most pivotal moments in modern history, maybe the most pivotal moment in modern history, let's face it. Mannerism is one of those broad sweeping terms that describes a particular period in Western art. Apply it to a number of disciplines such as painting, sculpture, architecture, and even furniture. Oh, I'm sitting on my Mannerist chair. Look at that. Of course, our focus, though, will be painting. Certainly painting is where it is the most significant. Mannerism is generally viewed as a bridge or transition between Renaissance and Baroque periods. Place it between about 1520, roughly marking the death of the great Renaissance painter Raphael, and about 1600. Some distinguish 1527 or so as the beginning, which was the terrible year Rome was sacked. Informally, however, no need to split hairs. Just see it as basically the 1500s. Raphael probably wouldn't mind. Or maybe he would, I don't know. Just call it the 1500s, kind of a little later in the 1500s. Mannerism began in Italy and eventually spread throughout Europe. Florence and Rome would be the epicenters. Hence, Italy dominates the theme. Mannerism... Oh, I am a professional. Following the Dark Ages, Europe hoisted itself into the post-classical Renaissance era. After the devastating rat-infested plague, or Black Death, between about 1346 and 1353, you got that? Anyway, at that time, the eve was right for monumental change. This was a time when, okay, let's get rolling here, and you know, boy, did they ever. Spanning well over 200 years, more like 300, Renaissance, meaning awakening or rebirth, generally translates into 3 respective categories: early Renaissance, High Renaissance, and late Renaissance. And late Renaissance is kind of synonymous with Mannerism. So, more or less, you can think of late Renaissance and Mannerism synonymously. Not all late Renaissance art conforms to the Mannerist vibe, and much of it sat on and still sits on the debatable fence. It's a bit of a loose area. I mean, clearly there was something really noteworthy going on, but these things are, I like to make that point. These things aren't black and white at all. The word Mannerism derives from Italian maniera, I think I said that right, which literally means style. It wasn't a word invented after the fact, but emerged directly from that time. Style, of course, was nothing new, but Mannerism brought rejuvenated energy, to say the least. Mannerism basically gravitated toward emotion, exaggeration, and abstraction. I can't even say it. Abstraction. Not abstraction in the modern sense, not like they were painting like Jackson Pollock or something. A more general use of the term abstraction. While earlier high Renaissance painting usually imparted sort of symmetry, precise structure, and calculated order. By contrast, Mannerism embarked on a sort of imaginative joyride, sometimes verging on the absurd, actually quite a bit verging on the absurd. Like an unhinged gargoyle, the genre didn't really just fall from the sky. During High Renaissance, certain artists, for example, Andrea del Sarto, were already sipping from this exotic new tonic. Most obvious, though, being a fleshy carnival painted in, newly cleaned, by the way, delightful colors, was Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel. That's the kind of thing that paved the way for Mannerism. You see, it was sort of going that way. But once settled into place, some of the more distinguished Mannerisms were, of course, Bronzino, El Greco, Pontormo, Parmigianino. Did I say that right? No, I don't know. Whatever. It was like 500 years ago. The guy's not going to care. Tintoretto, Vasari, Arcimboldo, Fiorentino. There's a lot more, but those are kind of some of the main people. Mannerist school is generally recognized by elongated bodies, dramatic facial expressions, eroticism, bending and twisting of nature, unusual effects of scale and composition, garish colors, humor, and a gallery of other delights. So you have to look at it, as well. Dreamy mysticism and a kind of psychological insight often encompass the field. As with, say, portraiture, still, utility subject matter was common. Not everything had to be an extravagant undertaking, but even with the seemingly mundane, Mannerist vitality frequently surfaced and became meantastic to the greater package, meaning it seemed like everything they touched often had this kind of fantastic, incredible Mannerist touch to it. It's there. Like all things Renaissance, Mannerism can be confusing, which is why I'm speaking to you. A hard to pin down little rascal. Aficionados need to be somewhat versed in its language. A single word or ism can seem like a special club with hardened practitioners and well-established guidelines. Nay, it was more an attitude, movement, wave of renewed inspiration that propagated within a labyrinth of circumstances. Although artists and studios could be highly competitive, there still existed a kind of clever, universal spirit. It was this informal edge, I think, that gave it its life. Again, I'm speaking about how it's not a finely tuned package. You have to kind of dive into it a bit and have a look, I would say. So anyway, sorry, here we go. Where am I here? Right here, sorry. So I want to tell you about like who were sort of the key Mannerists, and I think this is just my point of view. I think kind of the big Lebowski. There's an art term for you. I think Pontormo is, to me, this guy was the key kind of typifies that world. And have a look at Pontormo. That wasn't his name. Basically, at that time, if you were noteworthy in any way, you'd get the name of the town. So, you know, if I ever become noteworthy, can I call myself Edmonton? I don't know. I don't know. That's a thing. But Pontormo. So let's tell you, Pontormo with ungainly colors, gazing, restless figures, gravity-defying space, billiard table flat surfaces. Pontormo's art is both sensuous and, like his legendary personality, angst-ridden. I think he actually wrote his memoirs, which must be just unbelievable. I thought I might search for that one of these days. I can't imagine what that man would have said. It's got to be outrageous. I don't know. Anyway, sorry. Here, eloquence and awkwardness combine to create delicious tension. It's the kind of thing artists live for. Suspicious eyebrows would barely lift, I think, if his paintings were placed amongst modern surrealists, say, or expressionists, you know. If his paintings, say, was amongst, let's say, German expressionist Otto Dix, it would just fit right in, I think. You know. Perhaps no person, though, and listen, is plastered into the Mannerist fresco more than Giorgio Vasari. Painter, architect, writer, his ripping enthusiasm conforms to the stereotypical Renaissance personality. Despite creative diversity, and painfully undervalued paintings, which is my own thought, his legacy basically would become his writing, would become his legacy. For instance, with competence and typical Mannerist character, Vasari chiseled the influential 1550 text, Lives of the Most Eminent Painters, Sculptors, and Architects. No understatement, without Vasari, Mannerism could have been reduced to antiquity's finest print. Much is owed to Vasari. Now, Vasari was this incredible guy who did very much. And when he wrote that Lives, we sometimes call it, it was, in fact, the first art history document. And that document and Vasari is a whole other talk. And maybe I'll do that one day, because he is just this, he wasn't human. He did so much. It was unbelievable. And yeah, and history has kind of looked down on him as if he was some kind of third-rate artist, and I don't know. I just don't think that's the case. I think he was wonderful. I'm trying not to go on too much. I'm going to tell you about Vasari. Vasari would, like most artists in those days, would have a studio, a workshop, and while Vasari might have done that from time to time, often he traveled a lot, and often he might just show up somewhere, and he would hire some artists So to work with him and kind of create this little thing and get rolling. So yeah, what was that like? Vasari, like, what was an interview like? Like, what was an interview with Vasari like? I can't even imagine. Anyway, I'm blabbing, I'm ranting, and I can see that I need a shave. Who were the patrons who paid for and appreciated all this grand painting? 3 glaring examples: the church, monarchs, and aristocracy, and a rapidly expanding wealthy merchant class. Such as the Medici family. Oh, it's always the Medicis, isn't it? Pope Julius II and Francis I, King of France, are other examples. In raging pursuit of elegance and refinement, however pompous, the Medicis likely played the key role, closely followed by a ubiquitous fog of extravagance and self-celebrated vanity. On varying levels, patrons would have dictated the terms of production. After all, who was writing the checks? Yet, with philosophical exuberance now flowing from every Renaissance fountain, creativity was prospering, flourishing. Life was changing. It was unstoppable. Yeah, someone might have hired you to and paid you a considerable quantity of cash to do this painting, but these people were, let's face it, running wild with this. Notwithstanding Europe's own power struggles, barbarity, upheaval, and a healthy supply of sacking, the Renaissance powered a cascade of astonishing activity. Virtually everything associated with our modern era resembled, occurred, or began to occur at that time. So let's look at that time. Mercantilism, banking, taxes, engineering, literacy, Martin Luther, and the Roman Catholic Protestant divide, exploration, exploitation, feverish shipbuilding, spice trade, pursuit of gold and resources, the printing press, slavery, fall of the Aztecs and Incas, Copernicus, you name it. Engulfed in such turbulence, no surprise, art too would undergo some kind of, I think, a fairly massive transformation. How could anything sit still with all this going on? At another crucial development, artists started to become respected. That is, heightened from meager working class status to intellectuals in their own right. Flemish Renaissance master Albrecht Dürer, for instance, lamented, am I getting louder? I'm getting, because I'm getting excited. Albrecht Dürer lamented, once treated like a virtual parasite, later in life, especially after visiting Italy, the opposite was true. Dürer, by the way, with well-circulated woodcuts and almost godlike reputation, where am I? Dürer would have a massive influence on the Mannerists. He still has a massive influence. So persisting for several I know what I'm doing, really. Persisting for several generations, representing a few periods, Mannerism squeezed out some momentum. Quite a bit, actually. But the journey wasn't always roses, fine wine, and bulging tights. Enter Venetian artist Paolo Veronese. He's kind of associated with Mannerism. I wouldn't say totally, but I don't know. Let's get rid of that. Let's put him there. Let's put Veronese there. Put him there. He gave us one of the earliest and most renowned examples of artistic license. This is the stuff that happened at this time. Resplendent with naughty, audacious details, his outrageously massive Last Supper painting managed to piss off the already cranky church. Don't do that. Blasphemy. Veronese was actually hauled before the Inquisition. We can almost hear their irritating voices. Why do we see a person in this picture with a bloody nose? Why is there a jester holding a parrot? A German soldier? And so on. But in the end, punishment was avoided by astutely presenting his case. Veronese, he was good. Also, roguishly, humorously, he simply changed the name of the painting. I love that. We're almost done here. This is really kind of, yeah. Am I helping the Mannerist cause here? Probably not. Normally, far less offenses would have you impaled, roasted, or dismembered. He probably got away with it because Venice at that time was fiercely independent of Rome. Or maybe he had some sense of his status. Artists now were serious people. Maybe the new humanist ideology presented a degree of freedom. Maybe he had inside knowledge. Who knows? Importantly, he took one for the team. Yeah? As years passed, while still highly esteemed, Mannerism often received a lesser ranking than earlier high Renaissance art. Here was a mild degradation. It was irrational. It was B grade, anti-classical. It was a formula losing focus. Not inspired by previous models, but intimidated, reactionary. Therefore, like a freshly lopped off head, a sharp distinction separates high Renaissance from Mannerism. That kind of didn't make sense. Anyway, you get my point. Further humiliated, Mannerism served only as a transition to some other legitimate art form. In this way, almost cruelly, a proper identity is denied, and in some ways still denied, which is why I'm talking to you. But if only for its near anticipation of 20th century art, Mannerism more than deserves autonomous recognition. Finally, I hear a smattering of applause. Finally, notwithstanding complex 16th century living arrangements, Mannerism heightened and illuminated the Renaissance window of opportunity. Exploration went far. Envelopes were pushed. Canvases were stretched. Minds expanded. Isn't that what art is supposed to do?